Welcome, I'm Amy Jo Kim. In today's video, we'll share 7 innovation tips from Silicon Valley investors, people who see hundreds of startups every year and choose to work with only a few. What are they looking for? What advice do they give to aspiring entrepreneurs? Listen in and find out how to discover, develop, and pitch your hot idea so that it attracts investment. Happy holidays! We're wrapping up our first year publishing weekly innovation tips here at Game Thinking TV. To celebrate this milestone, we're packaging up and sharing with you the most brilliant and actionable innovation insights that we've collected all year from our worldwide community of experts. First up, 7 high-impact insights from Silicon Valley investors. Now, these investors all have something in common that not all investors share, so listen closely and see if you can figure it out. If you've got a good idea that's ahead of its time, you've got to develop a thick skin to ward off the naysayers. Here's Charles Hudson of Precursor Ventures sharing what he wished he'd known about this when he first started out.
If people are making fun of you, you're probably doing something right. And almost all of these waves that I've been a part of, there was a long period of time where people thought it was silly or a fad or it wouldn't work or they didn't understand it. And I think what I've learned is 2 things happen when you jump on a wave early. First of all, you know infinitely more than anybody else from the outside, because from the outside, you can't really tell what's happening when it's early. And second, that community of people that you meet in the early days oftentimes ends up becoming the experts in 5 years. And by being plugged in with that early sort of adopter, early enthusiast scene, you get a social network in the space that ends up being really durable. And in every case, I can remember feeling the moment where like, okay, this is no longer the front end of the wave. People don't think this is crazy or weird anymore. People have sort of bought into the idea that this thing that I'm working on is a thing. And that's usually when I start thinking about, well, what comes next?
As you develop and validate your idea, it's crucial to understand the power of network effects. This simple idea can create rapid growth and customer lock-in and help make your idea more fundable. Here's James Currier of NFX breaking it down for us and sharing a great example of network effects in action in a 2-sided marketplace.
So a network effect, in my mind, very simply, is that every new user of your product makes the product better for all the other users. Does user number 2 make it better for user number 1? Does user number 1000 make it better for user number 1? One came in called Outdoorsy, and they were trying to get people to list their RVs on their website so that other people could rent the RVs. So it's a 2-sided marketplace where you've got all this supply. People use their RVs for 9 days a year, and the rest of the time they sit in the driveway. And you've got all these people who are trying to rent RVs. And they were trying to figure out how to get those 2 sides connected, and they couldn't figure it out. And so they came to the accelerator to figure it out, and we showed them how to do it. But we knew immediately that that was a much bigger business than most people thought. And we knew that the company could probably take the whole market by building good software for both sides. And they're in the process of doing that. So when you look at exit values, you know as an investor that the network effect businesses are going to have such much higher values, like a GitHub, $7 billion or something for a social network of engineers, right? I mean, amazing, right? It's because it's unreplicable. If you can't ever build that again, that's now what the engineers are on. So you're done.
What's the best way to pitch your idea to investors? Serial entrepreneur Siqi Chen has been on both sides of the negotiating table, pitching ideas like his latest venture, Sandbox VR, and evaluating ideas as an investor. Siqi has some deep and sometimes surprising insights about persuasion and storytelling. Check out his advice on how to pitch potential investors.
I make slides the same way I make presentations, is what emotions do I want to draw out of the audience? And I remember talking to Vinod Khosla from Khosla Ventures, and I asked him, this is like 7 years ago, how he makes investment decisions. And I'll never forget his answer. He literally was one word. He said emotion. And at the time, I didn't really get it. I do get it now, right? Like emotions are powerful because that's what forms opinions. That's what drives people to action. And by having more slides or fewer slides, what have you, if you can, as long as you can maximize the emotion you create in your audience, that's what's going to convince people. Ultimately, the art of presentation is not about delivering facts, making jokes, acting confident, but it ultimately is the art of storytelling. And storytelling to me is magic in a very real sense, like not pretend magic, like real world magic. If you think about what magic is, you know, you say some words, you say a spell, you cast a spell. And what happens when you wave that magic wand, you say these magic words is things happen, right? People float, you control things, the world changes. And so if you think about it that way, storytelling is actually a real life superpower. It's the closest thing to magic and a superpower that exists for real. And that's why I think the goal is ultimately to move people through emotions to action.
When I first heard Siqi say, lead with your weakness, I was actually kind of skeptical. But when he explained it and demonstrated it with his own presentation skills, I realized that this is a counterintuitive, powerful, and highly actionable piece of advice.
You know, everyone out there, how do you stand out? Everyone out there leads with their strengths. They talk about how awesome they are, how awesome the product is, how awesome the company is, here's why you should invest. But what I found in almost every presentation is leading with the weaknesses works in our favor, because by doing that, you immediately disarm the listener, right? We are a VR company at Sandbox VR. We do virtual reality experiences in various retail locations. And so the first slide in our deck is literally VR is a disappointment, which is like the elephant in the room that everyone is thinking whenever you're trying to pitch a VR company. And when we have an elevator pitch with an investor, we say this. We say, you know, there's like 3 sectors, and at least it was true a year ago. There's 3 sectors that aren't hot right now. One is virtual reality. No one wants to invest in VR. Content, nobody really usually wants to invest in. And retail is usually not a venture backable company. We are all 3 at the same time. So this is probably the most unfundable company in the world, but hear us out. And they do.
Based in San Francisco, Steve Hoffman runs Founderspace, a startup accelerator with satellite operations all around the world. Steve doesn't just fund companies, he actively coaches them through the early stages of bringing their ideas to life. Before he became an investor, Steve was a startup founder, and that means he knows firsthand the blinding, sometimes misleading power of falling in love with your ideas.
The biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs make is that they fall in love with their product. And when you're in love, I always say love is blind. So you know, when you're infatuated, you tend not to see it for what it really is. And when people give you feedback, you don't listen. You're like, no, you know, you don't understand. This is really good. You just don't get it. So the advice I give startup founders, try to prevent this, is don't fall in love with your product. Who you need to love are your customers. So you need to love them, and they need to love your product. So your job is to love them enough to really listen to them like you do in a good relationship, and discover their psychology, what's in their head, what they're really thinking, and get them to the point where they are just crazy infatuated with your product. Because if they're infatuated with your product, then you win. If you're infatuated with your product, you don't win. I mean, that only helps you, actually it only hurts you to be infatuated with your product.
Steve's entrepreneurial background taught him to listen to the data and build something small and simple to test out ideas quickly. Here he connects the dots and explains why it's so important to iterate smart.
Do not listen to your heart. Listen to the data and gather the data early. Like push data gathering as far forward as you possibly can. Build as little as possible as you possibly can, because the more you build, you fall in love with it, what you build. It's the IKEA effect, right? When you build your own furniture, IKEA is brilliant. You fall in love with that furniture. You know, they knew it. You don't return it because you built it. So when you build your product, the less you build, the better off you are. Figuring out ways to gather data early in the process with doing as little work as possible is really the challenging part. How do you do these experiments? How can you get meaningful data without even a prototype?
So there you have it, 7 powerful innovation tips from Silicon Valley investors. Did you figure out what they all have in common? Leave your guesses in the comments. And in next week's episode, part 2, I'll reveal the answer and shout out anyone who got it right. We covered a lot today, and there's so much gold in there, so much you don't want to miss, right? So that's why we created a cheat sheet for you, so you can apply these ideas to your own work. Go to gamethinking.io/investor tips to pick up your Investor Tips cheat sheet and get some other goodies that I know you'll like. I hope these powerful ideas inspire you to innovate smarter and have a positive impact in the next decade. Stay tuned for the second installment in this 3-part series, 7 innovation tips from expert game designers. You don't want to miss this, so be sure that you subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss out. I'll see you right here next week on Game Thinking TV. Bye for now.